Hi guys, welcome to another edition of Goal Bazan. We're going to discuss about Carlos Queiroz today. I'm back here again with our regular panelists, Babak, Golri, Sina and Babak. Unfortunately, Mahan, Sarkar Hashemi, Pezhman, and Ali Zapayan couldn't be with us. But end of this podcast, you will hear some interesting news from Pezhman Pars regarding Queiroz from the press conference he got from Sweden. And also we have Mani from the BBC today as a guest today. So despite the sanctions, Queiroz took Iran to the World Cup and made Iran rank 42nd in the world, and right now Iran is ranked first currently in Asia. Looking at it, for me, the most important thing was to see how well we defended, played tactical football, and how disciplined our players were and fought as a team and not as a bunch of individuals at what Queiroz brought. His charisma and his passion for the game even made our players in the league get battered, even perform as hard as they could to get recognized by Queiroz. Hands down, right now he's been our best manager in my lifetime, and I can't thank him enough for that. How you guys doing? How you doing, Babak?
It's good to be here, Pasha, and I'm looking forward to a chat.
I appreciate it. Sina, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, Pasha. It's great to speak to you guys.
Thank you. And Mani, thank you for coming on, my friend. And Mani is obviously...
Thank you very much for inviting me. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So, guys, the first question I want to ask you guys, I'm going to start off with you, Mani, is that the manner that Queiroz suddenly left and the unfair criticism he got from the IFF, the Iranian Football Federation, was really absurd and ridiculous. Who is at fault here? Do you think the way they treated Queiroz towards the end of his term and the way he just, terminated his contract and said, I'm just going to leave, was that correct?
Well, I think that there's been a certain amount of revisionism with Carlos Queiroz. I think I would describe Carlos Queiroz's contribution to Iranian football as being relatively successful. But, I think in the World Cup, they basically turned up to one match, which was Argentina. They didn't need to play in the way they did against Nigeria, and by the time they got to Bosnia, they were mentally tired because all their eggs were in the Argentina basket. And his brand of football in the Asian Cup was awful. They were so defensive in games they had no reason to be. I mean, the last game against the UAE, which Iran won with a last-minute winner, was the UAE's to win, and they would have won it if they had a striker. And I don't accept that they lost the quarter-final against Iraq because Pouladi was sent off, because I think that by that stage Iran should have been at least 2-0 up. Iraq were there for the taking, and even with 10 men, Iran managed to hold them to penalties. So I think his brand of football, which has always been his brand of football, which is defensive, playing on the counter-attack, it was successful to a point, but it was unattractive, it was quite dull, and it's not what Iranian football is about. The identity of Iranian football has been based on exciting, off-the-cuff football, and that doesn't mean you have to be indisciplined to play that kind of football. The two things aren't mutually exclusive. I praise him for the discipline that he gave to the Iranian defence. I've never seen that kind of discipline in any other West Asian team before. But he's not the be-all and he's not the end-all. And he has a record of being sacked as the head coach. And I think that what he's doing now, he's a professional whinger, to take the phrase of the old Arsenal manager George Graham when he was talking about Tottenham fans. That's what Carlos Queiroz is. All he does is whinge. And if he wants to leave, then he should leave. He shouldn't be haggling and trying to use semantics to get a payoff. He wants to leave, so let him go. He's wanted to leave since the Asian Cup. He told me himself at the Asian Cup that he wanted to leave. So if that's what he wants, then he should go.
Babak?
Well, initially when Mani said that he's been relatively successful, I would agree with that assessment. But when we go deeper into his explanation, I'm going to be a little bit, let's say, on the other side of the fence. I think that, first of all, the concept that Iranian football is about attacking football, I mean, what have we done to justify that tag? We're not Brazil. We don't have a given right to be attacking and successful on the pitch by getting results. I think the results speak for themselves. Under Carlos Queiroz, we qualified for the World Cup, something we failed to do 4 years earlier. I think he did so with a squad which many observers agree is not the most talented and definitely well past its best days. I mean, the spine of the side is well over 30, and that's the kind of side that he took to the World Cup. During the World Cup, yes, I agree, we did play defensive football. Well, we knew that's what we were going to get with him. I mean, it was against Lebanon in the World Cup qualifiers at a point where in June, a year before the World Cup, when things changed, and he changed the tactics completely because it wasn't working, and he turned into much more counter-attacking team, letting the opponents take the ball. And during the World Cup, I mean, it was a logical approach against Nigeria. The first game, you've got to start a little bit cagey. Probably was a missed opportunity because we needed to get a win if we had a chance of qualifying. Against Argentina, we know how that panned out. And against Bosnia, like Mani said, we were mentally and probably physically burnt out. During the Asian Cup, I think that coming up against teams that are much more inferior than us cost us in a way because it makes us look far more defensive than we are. UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, all three of them are far beneath our technical ability, but you couldn't change the style at that point. But against Iraq, I thought we began to really click, and we had an amazing first half an hour. We could have easily been 2 or 3 up. So, yes, we didn't score a second goal, but to say that it wasn't because of the red card that we got knocked out is a little bit harsh. In terms of the last point about him wanting to leave, I'm not sure. He probably does want to leave, but they're pushing him out of the door as well. So, as a professional, you wouldn't expect him to just put his head down and say, "All right, I'm going, and I'm going to give up my money as well." So, what he's doing right now is expected. If the IFF really wants him out, they should pay him off. But they're really trying to push him away so that he resigns and they don't have to pay him any compensation. So overall, I think he's done as good as we would expect. And to say that he left a long-term legacy, I wouldn't think so. But he did show us that for the first time, at least again in my lifetime, to see a disciplined and tactically astute Iranian team where no individual stands out above the team. That's the first time I've seen since the 1992 Asian Cup. We've always depended on individual talent and individual players, but this side, you could take out anyone out of that side and you wouldn't say we would be any weaker or stronger, So,
but is that to do with Queiroz, or is that to do with the quality of the players that he has? I mean, how would this team have played if Queiroz was the coach 15 years ago with players like Matavikia, Karimi, Dai still at his peak? Would people have accepted Iran playing in that way, in this way, and they would have done under Queiroz because that's the only way he plays? Would people have accepted this with those players who were so talented? We don't have anyone like that in our team at the moment.
Exactly, and I agree with you. No, we wouldn't have accepted it. But the point is, when Carlos Queiroz took over, we all knew it's a bit of a crossroads for Iranian football. We thought that the generation shift would happen earlier during his reign, and we're a bit disappointed that he took more time to actually do that. But it was the Asian Cup when he began to actually, let's say, rejuvenate the side by introducing Pur Ali Ganji and Vahid Amiri and Sardar Azmoun. So until then, we're a little bit disappointed, as in he was just delaying the inevitable and not really giving us a roadmap to the future. But he's probably just about giving us a hint towards what's to come.
I don't want you to think that I'm some sort of mouthpiece for the IFF. I mean, he's achieved good results, and I think that he will, in a way, leave a legacy if he is actually going, and that is the players that Babak has just mentioned, because they're the future. Nekhunama's gone. I wouldn't be surprised if Teimourian goes sooner rather than later, because by the next World Cup, I think he'll be too old. And, Hosseini may well be too old by the next World Cup as well. And he's introduced an excellent goalkeeper, and Amiri Ghafouri particularly was excellent in the Asian Cup, and what he's also done, which I think is very important, which is why I think the next coach should also be a non-Iranian coach, is that he's taken players from the diaspora, and it's those players who like Dejaga, Guchan Nejad to an extent, who have proved to be so important in that team.
Sina, now I'm going to ask you this question. What do you think, with the departure of Carlos Queiroz, do you think it will affect our national team in a negative manner? And where do you think our national team will be from here on out?
I think first of all, some suggestions that Queiroz is a father figure to Iranian football. I think that's completely absurd. I completely disagree with that. I think, as the guy said, he does leave a legacy, but to say that he's the father of modern Iranian football, which I've read on a few occasions, it's just completely wrong. I think when you call someone a father in any field, it should be someone who's changed the culture of that field completely. He's not changed the culture of our football. He's made a lot of changes to the national team, but at the end of the day, national team isn't the pinnacle. It is the pinnacle of our football, but it's not the entire package. You feel like there's a lot more involved in our football culture, and he's not been able to change everything. Maybe if he was given more time, he would have been able to, but he had in 4 years. But what he did do was instigate, as the guy said, a disciplined team, and I think considering the team that we had, the players that we had, I can go through individual names. It's almost impossible to play an attacking football. With the league that produces such a low amount of goal, on a game-to-game basis, it doesn't really produce great attacking players. So it's not really Queiroz's fault, but what he's done was to get the best out of what he had, and I think he did it well. The World Cup to the Asian Cup, the time space was so short. I wasn't expecting him to change his philosophy that much, with the training camps being cancelled and so many few friendly games. But as I said, he did a good job considering what he had, and I think what I was really looking forward to seeing was if he stayed on with this transitional generation that is needed. Maybe we're a year late to go through this transition. It's needed, and I was looking forward to see how he deals with that, because offensive ball, if he gets result, it's fair enough. But when you have young, talented players such as Jahanbakhsh, such as Osman, Mohsen Musalman is another one, and a couple of other players coming through as well. How would they into this defensive system, and maybe would he change his philosophy or not? We weren't able to see it, but it does leave a bit of negative side effects on Team Melli, certainly for the next manager to come in. I think it's a poisonous job for anyone to come in at this moment of time, because the media are completely on Queiroz's side, and especially if a domestic and a local manager is in charge, they will be on his back straight away from the first minute, and he wouldn't really have to as he should do.
But a lot of people were on Queiroz's back. Let's not forget that with 3 games to go in the World Cup qualifiers, Iran had an outside chance of qualifying. The best that most people were hoping for was a playoff place. I spoke to one of the players who said we've got a 30% chance of qualifying. We're not going to do it. And I don't remember everyone then, offering up statues of Queiroz and naming roads after him or anything like that. So, I think the next manager, if he is Iranian, I think Sina's right. He'll struggle. But I think, if you look at Iran's next matches, they're going to be in the first group stage of the World Cup qualifiers, games that Iran should win fairly easily. So if a guy comes in who's competent, then he's going to have a honeymoon period. They'll get a few wins under his belt. He'll get to see the players in relatively unpressured matches, and by the time he gets him to the important stage, he'll know those players if he didn't know them already. And so I don't think it's that bad a job. But after all, I think in the world there are probably only 40 teams who have a realistic chance of qualifying for the World Cup, and Iran's one of them. And given the passion that there is for football in Iran, given the salary that a coach can expect to get from the IFF, which is pretty good, it's a good job to get. Iran really is a good job to get.
I'd like to just respond to the guys, if you don't mind, Pasha.
No, go ahead.
I agree with Sina. He wasn't a father figure to Iranian football, because Iranian football is like an orphan. So yes, he couldn't make long-lasting changes. But what he did do is add a culture of team spirit and a united front between the players. And I don't remember the last time, if ever, this has been in modern Iranian football. So yes, that is a big change. That is something that is a bit understated, because we've always seen cliques in the national team. We've always seen players and camps and let's say the media even being split, let's say, overall. But we haven't had it with this team, at least over the last 2 years. And yes, it was at that point where he changed things against Lebanon, and everything since then fell into place. So yes, before that, there was a lot of rumbles about if we're not going to qualify, he should leave. And I agree, it's a results business at the end of the day. It wasn't like everyone was behind Carlos Queiroz even when things were going wrong. But when Mani says that the group for the World Cup qualifiers first stage that's going to come up, it's going to be games that Iran should be winning, I'm not sure about that. If you come up against Saudi, Oman, teams like this, they're not given victories. Yes, we should qualify to the next stage, and we probably will, but it's not as clear-cut as before. I mean, over the last 10, 15 years, especially in West Asian football, the gap has been very tight. We've lost to a lot of teams that we usually wouldn't lose to. I mean, games against Qatar, even before Carlos Queiroz, were games that we've been struggling with. UAE has been getting the better of us over the last few years as well. Bahrain, we know they beat us. Oman had a weak victory over us a few years ago. Lebanon beat us at Beirut. Yes, that was under Carlos Queiroz. But overall, it's not as done and dusted. The gaps are very tight. So I think getting a competent manager like Mani says is very important. But how many of them are there, especially in Iran?
I think. Go on.
Oh, sorry, man. I'll just have a quick question. So let's say whoever the next manager is going to be, do you think he's going to get rid of the Deadwoods as we have now? As if you look at the age gap in our players right now, it's still the same people over and over again, around 30s, late 29s, stuff like that. So, do you think the next manager, if he comes in, do you think he's going to get rid of the Deadwoods and he's trying to implement more young players in, or is it just going to be the same thing?
Well, I'm not sure there is that much Deadwood, really. It's a pretty well-oiled team, the starting 11, and I think that whoever the next manager is would be very foolish to get rid of the experienced players, because he'll need them. He'll need people like Teimourian. He'll need Shojai, and it's a shame Nekunam's retired now, really, because he'll need those people to act with his voice on the pitch. So I think that would be extremely foolish if he was to, and I don't think anyone would. Unless you're a coach who knows Iranian football, the league, then why would you turn up and get rid of players based on age when you don't know anything about them, when you don't know anything about the younger players in the league?
Sina?
I kind of disagree. I think there are certain players that do need changing, because they are maybe not necessarily better players, but they're at the same level with a younger age, which I think if you're younger and you're at the same level, then you should be priority. I mean, certainly with Shujai, as you mentioned, a player who we saw in the Asian Cup was Surush Rafi. He's been fantastic in the last 2 seasons in Iran. Of course, he's had military issues, military service issues, and he's been unable to play since January, even for his club. But these are the kind of players that I think should be given more than just 15 minutes per game to really show themselves. I mean, Khosrow Haydari is another one. I think he's 31, 32. I think now. I think there are better players to be given that chance. If he's going to sit on the bench, then I'd rather see a younger player who's played really well in the last 2 seasons to come on and sit on that bench. He'll learn a lot from the experience.
But if you're a new coach who's just coming in to coach a national team, how are you going to know about these players? The sensible thing, the logical thing would be to stick with the players who have done as well as these players have done. Surely, I mean, I'm not saying stay with them for the World Cup. Take all of these players to the World Cup, but you're not going to. Why make change for change's sake?
No, I agree, but that's in the case if a foreign manager comes in, which I think we will have a foreign manager. I think a local manager will be in soon, and he'll most definitely be from a team that is currently in the league, so they'll probably know the league better than anyone else, and that's why that's why I'm saying the changes will be made, because there will be a coach who knows the play as well.
Babak?
I think so. I agree with, let's say, Mani to a degree and Sina to a degree. Basically, I think that the players should be phased out gradually, especially if Queiroz is being changed and a new guy comes in. He cannot risk disrupting this well-oiled machine, as I think Mani put it. So Haydari is already out of the team, so I wouldn't call up players that are on the bench and they're well past it, like Saudade, Haydari, etc. But when it comes to the first team, with Nekunam out of the picture, you definitely need Teimourian to be starting besides the next central midfielder, whoever that is. At the same time, in defense, Pezhman Pars and Jalal Hosseini, they're easily good enough to go for the next, I don't know, a couple of years, I would say. And possibly they could make it to the squad for the World Cup, even if we do qualify. So overall, I would think that, yes, we need to phase these players out, but it needs to be done gradually. And we cannot take risks, especially if a new manager is coming in.
Babak, I'm going to go back to you again. Who do you think so far has been under Queiroz in the past couple of years? Do you think, has been the best player under Queiroz and the most improved player under Queiroz?
I would say, if you want to find a symbol to Queiroz's reign, I would put Gucci. I would say that he saved us on a few occasions. He helped us qualify for the World Cup with some crucial goals, even in games which we weren't the better side. He saved us against the UAE. He scored the equalizer against Iraq. Overall, I would say he's the symbol of Carlos Queiroz's reign. He was also diaspora, as Mani said earlier, so he was brought, he was probably, I think he was the first, if not the second, or the second player, like Ashkan Dejava, who came through to represent Iran. So I would probably say Gucci's been a symbol of Queiroz's reign, but when you talk about most improved player, it's difficult. Any of the defenders could probably have a stake over there. No one really stands out in my mind, but it's good to see players like Morteza Pouradiganji and Vahid Amiri and Ali Reza Haighi coming out of nowhere to be named our first goalkeeper on the eve of the World Cup, and probably doing enough over the last year or so to suggest that he's comfortably our number one right now.
Yeah.
Mani?
I think that the best player under Queiroz has been Dejaga by a distance, actually. I think Dejaga is class. He was one of the best players in the Asian Cup. And I think perhaps if Iran had got to the final, he would have been player of the tournament. I would say probably the most improved player is probably Hosseini. I think at the World Cup he was magnificent, absolutely brilliant, and he's become a rock in the defence. So I will go for those two players.
Sina?
I think a symbol or a key figure in this Iran team must be that, because his role goes much deeper than just a simple player on the field. I think he's had a very big role as a leader in that team. Everyone in the team respects him now that he's gone off. Well, of course, it's in the changing room, I think, more than it is on the pitch. But I think even Queiroz added to it as well. He's been a very important player for him in the last 4 years. In terms of who's been improved the most, I'm going to go with Pezhman Pars. I think after Aghili was controversially put aside from the team, Pars has come in and has done a great job. And there's been a lot said about Rahmati, still whether, or, at the World Cup, he was still our best goalkeeper where he wasn't taken. But I don't think we really missed Aghili that much, because Montazeri was such a great player when he came in. So I think Montazeri has to be there.
Thank you. And going back to you again, Mani, is that what was your favorite moment under Carlos Queiroz? Mine definitely was the hand gesture he gave to the South Korean coach after Gucci scored that goal.
My favourite moment? I don't know. You caught me out, actually. I was there, actually, so I was probably the final whistle in that game, just before the hand gesture when Iran qualified for the World Cup. That's probably my favourite moment.
Babak?
Yeah, I would agree that it was that game which basically sealed a surprise and probably a shock to most Iranians. I would say, yeah, that was probably the sweetest moment under his reign.
Sina?
I'm going to be a little bit different, and I'm going to go with the 90 minutes against Argentina before added time. Forget the added time. Yeah, just 90 minutes. I think it was a great performance. Certainly in my lifetime, it's been up there with the very best. Whether it was defensively or going forward, the way everyone put in 150% throughout the game. I thought it was a great game before, as I said before, the added time.
And what was your favorite football match we played under Carlos Queiroz? The best footballing style we played? And mine would have definitely been when we played against Iraq in the Asian Cup. Because if it was under a different coach, whoever it was, it would definitely not come back like that. And the hunger and the passion the players showed and the charisma they showed to come back and try to fight it up, even down with 10 men. You won't ever see that again with a local coach or another foreign coach. And that's why I love Carlos Queiroz, because he's implemented these players with passion and fighting for one another. So what was yours?
I disagree with that. I remember the 2004 Asian Cup when Iran played for just as long with 10 men against the hosts in the home stadium against China, and that went to penalties. So I certainly don't think Carlos Queiroz is the only man who can instill that sort of motivation into a team.
Sina?
No, sorry.
Go on, Babak.
I was going to say, when it comes to team spirit, that's something that Iranian football, in terms of, let's say, rallying behind each other, especially when we're underdogs, that's always been something that we've been good at. Being against the wall and just coming back with 10 men, or that's something which is, I consider, temporary. It's just a burst of passion, let's say, during a game. So, like you said, against Iraq, I agree with Mani. It's happened before. We had a game against South Korea, which I think Karimi scored the hat-trick, if I'm not mistaken. It was a 4-3.
Yeah, 2004, yeah.
That's another game, again, which went back and forth and yo-yoed, So, in that sense, I think that, yes, we shouldn't overstate that Queiroz is the only guy who can get us to come back with 10 men down. It's happened before, and it's something that Iranian football has always been good at. When tactics are out of the window, and it's all about passion and spirit and just hustle and bustle, and we get something out of the game, and we've done it throughout our history.
Sina?
Yeah, I disagree as well. I actually think the game against Iraq, we were defensively a little bit uncharacteristic, even with 10 men. I think especially when you're a defensive side, you must at least practice to play with 10 men. But it didn't seem like against Iraq. We were all over the place. I think it was his. If I want to be harsh, it was his only wrong substitution. He brought on Amiri and he pushed Harsafi to left back, and we scored a couple of goals. We can see the goals from the left side. But yeah, I think the game against South Korea was probably the best one, in terms of performance and the result at the end of it.
Before we go on and talk about life after Queiroz and the possible candidates and who do you guys want to be the next manager, is that coming off with you, Babak, is that sum up your thoughts on Queiroz's career with Iran in these past 4 years, we should say, and what do you think the future will hold after that?
Well, I think I've mentioned this to the guys before, either on or off the podcast, that I think Carlos Queiroz was a bit like a plaster on a bleeding wound. He covered the bleeding and he stopped it for a while, and he created a team that had a greater, let's say, sum than its parts. So we probably didn't expect to qualify for the World Cup with the squad that we had. I didn't, even though we had a good coach, good manager, and overall the kind of, let's say, he's reignited an interest which was kind of waning in Iranian football, and fans were a little bit disillusioned, and he's gotten the people back to be interested in their national team and proud of their national team, and that has been a long time coming. For me, 2006 was at the World Cup. I was there. It was very disappointing, and it was probably the low point of my life when it came to supporting the national team, when I saw cliques in the team, and then Ali Karimi refusing to come onto the pitch, twice gesturing to Branco and Chalanga that I'm not going to come on when he asked him to warm up and come on as a substitute. That was a disgrace for me. And then later on, Karimi was hailed as a hero, and then this whole anti-Ali Dai and pro-Ali Dai thing. So this tarnished Iranian football for probably a decade, or if not more. So it's good that we've passed that stage, and it's good that we've seen that, yes, we can play as a team. We can play with tactics. We've always thought that Iranian footballers cannot play a tactically smart and astute game, but we've seen that we can do that. Yes, we need the right coach, and we probably need to trust that coach, because a lot of things that Carlos Queiroz was doing initially, a lot of us didn't agree with. When he decided not to put Rahmani back in, we thought it's a bit petty. But overall, it worked out. Maybe he was a little bit lucky at the end. But it's difficult for me to see where we go from here, because I don't think the IFF has a plan or a vision. So it could end up anyway. We could have a local coach. We could have a foreign coach. It could be anything at all. So it's hard for me to try to make some predictions now.
Sina?
Bob said it perfectly. A plaster on a bleeding wound. I think you can't really say it better than that. Fundamental problems of our football are still there, but I'm not really going to go into too much detail in that sense. But what he did bring to the team was not just to the team, but I think in the region, in the Middle East, even if you watch the national teams or the clubs, whether it's UAE or Qatar or Saudi Arabia, that discipline hasn't been there, and most of the time it's been our shortcoming in the region when it comes to playing against the Eastern Asian sides. That discipline or the fitness levels have always been something of a concern, but there was none of that with Iran, I think. And the perfect example is the games against South Korea. I mean, one of the reasons why we weren't able to qualify for the 2010 World Cup was conceding 2 late goals against South in the 2 games, and Park Ji-sung scored those 2 goals. But for the 2014 one, we managed to hold on, and it was because we didn't really feel that tired, and we were disciplined and focused for the entire game. I think he brought a lot to our football in terms of a different style of football. It's given coaches something different to think about. It's given a lot of tactical discipline to the players. I watched the league a lot. I watched the Iranian league more than I watched the English Premier League, and you can see a few differences in terms of the way teams defend. But I think that difference and the things we want, the changes that we want in Iranian football, would have been made if maybe he was still there a little longer.
Mani?
Well, I think there's a lot of doom and gloom. I mean, this isn't the end of Iranian football. It's not the end of the national team. The fact is that Iran have done better in the Asian Cup with coaches other than Queiroz. Iran have done better in the World Cup with coaches other than Queiroz, and I imagine they'll do better in those 2 competitions in the future as well. He's left a good squad. He wasn't one of those. He's not Rinos Michels who's just left. The Netherlands. This is a guy who was the coach of the national team, and that's it. I mean, how many games did he go to in Iran? What kind of input did he have in the league? And I admit that he probably would have had more input if the local coaches had accepted him more, or some of them. But he's left a decent squad. The only thing that I would worry about particularly is the fact that the entire squad of players believed in him, and they really liked playing for him. And you wonder if they'll turn up to the next camp or the next match with whoever the coach is, and maybe turn up with lacking a bit of motivation, maybe feeling a little demoralised about the fact that the guy who they really believed in and they trusted isn't there anymore. Don't know if that's going to be the case, but that is the biggest worry for me.
Thank you. So we're gonna go after our next topic discussion is life after Queiroz, and coming back to you, Babak, is who would you honestly want, and what are some possible candidates that you think that IFF will go after to make our who would be our next coach?
Definitely has to be foreign. That's the first prerequisite for me, and I would have probably gone for Vahid Halil Hodzic if he hadn't already taken a job recently. So that guy, he had an impressive reign with Algeria. He wasn't loved by the fans until the World Cup, and even after the World Cup, he wasn't really. I mean, his legacy generally was not a positive one, but for the neutrals who watched the Algerian team during the World Cup, you would say that he brought a brand of football that really took the game to the opponents, and no one expected that from Algeria. But it's difficult for me to see who is available, and considering what Mani said about the players and how they'll react, it suggests to me that, especially with the bigger players like Ashkan Dejaga and let's say Teimourian, Hosseini, the guys who are the veterans of the side or the key pillars of the side, you'd want a bigger name, someone who would automatically get the respect in a way, but it's difficult to see many names available. And considering the fact that IFF or the sports ministry was not happy to make those payments or to pay Carlos Queiroz's salary, you would think that they're going to go for a cheaper option, and that would kind of rule out many notable coaches. So I really don't know where we're going from here.
Mani?
Well, I'm not sure a notable coach is really the way forward. I'm not sure that kind of character really works in Iran or in Asia. I mean, if you look at Uli Shtilaka, the coach of South Korea, he came from nowhere, and he took a team with on its uppers after the terrible World Cup they had with big injuries to big players, and he took them all the way to the final. So I'm not sure you necessarily need a big name. I'm not sure you necessarily need a big name to gain respect. The people I would go for, my first choice would be Zlatko Kranjčar, who's currently coaching in Qatar. He knows the Iranian league. He knows the Iranian football culture. He's won the Iranian league. It won't be difficult to get him out of his job in Qatar. I mean, their season ends soon anyway, so he can easily leave. But also, I was very impressed with Cosmin Oleriu, who was the Saudi Arabia coach in the Asian Cup. He was only there for 40 days. There wasn't much he could do with them, really. But he's a very bright guy, and he is also, he's been around the region. And if you look at the guy who I think is personally the most successful coach in my lifetime with Iran, Branko Ivankovic, he came from nowhere, and he was there for a while. He was there for a long time, and he earned the respect of everyone apart from Ali Karimi in the end. So I don't think you don't necessarily need a big name to turn up, and you need someone who's going to be there for 3 years. Don't forget.
Sina?
I think I was thinking of Kranjčar as well, as Mani said. I think when it comes to foreign managers, if you look in, we're looking for not an easy option, but the first name that comes into your mind is Kranjčar. He worked for Iran on many occasions. He worked for Persepolis and Sepahan as well. And yeah, he was considered to be. He was linked to the under-23s job as well, which Khakpour got in the end. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's mentioned again. But I'm still going to go, not my personal opinion, as in personal choice, but I think they will go for a local manager. Certainly Hossein Faraki would be mentioning there. He's been he worked with Ivankovic for a long time. He's been in around Team Melli for years. He's worked successfully in the Iranian league. He won the league with Fulad last season. He's currently Sepahan, not necessarily great results, but he's just moved there. So I think that's going to be there. Other names, Yahya Gul Mohammadi and Ali Reza Mansourian as well. They'll be in and around. But I think we'll be seeing a local manager in charge.
Local or foreign manager? Will the philosophy that Queiroz implemented be gone now? Just due to whoever they're going to bring in, or do you think somehow they'll cope with that and try to build upon it? Babak?
I would personally build upon it. For me, as a supporter and a follower of football, it's about winning. Not everyone is privileged to say that they have the right to win and win in style. It's about winning first and foremost. So we've never made the World Cup twice in a row, qualified for the World Cup twice in a row. When was the last time we won the Asian Cup? If that's the standard we're judging Carlos Queiroz by, we haven't won it for, I think it's about, 40 years, more or less. So with Queiroz, I was relatively confident that we would qualify for the next World Cup as well. But now the challenge is, can we break that hoodoo and can we qualify for the World Cup? I would build upon the same style and not try to make too many changes. For that, you would need a manager who is smart enough to understand the strengths of the team and be willing to continue Carlos Queiroz's work rather than try to make a completely different, stamp his own authority and say, oh, no, we've played defensive football for the last 3-4 years. I'm going to play a brand of attacking football and it's going to backfire. So I would like to build upon that style, and I would like to have someone who shares that philosophy. Even if he's not a notable manager, as Mani says, I would like someone who has that sort of defensive fluidity. Someone like Otto Rehagel, if others don't mind. I know he's retired now, I think. But someone who shares that counter-attacking style.
Sina?
I think when it comes to philosophies, I think we also have to consider that in 4 years' time, if we're at the World Cup, then I'd say around 80% of this team wouldn't be there. I think the only name that is most definitely will be there is probably Dejaga and Hajsafi. I think the rest may be too old to get into that team. I'd build on it in the way that the foundations are there in terms of the defensive game, but we have to be a little bit more adventurous going forward. I think we struggle against teams around us a lot more than we used to. Of course, they're improving at a huge rate, but at the same time, we know that our standards of football are a lot higher. So I think we need to develop a more adventurous style with the players that we have coming through as well, Adreza Jahanbakhsh, Talia and Sardar Osman, as I mentioned, and alongside a few others. So we have that potential. I don't think we can limit ourselves to a counter-attacking and just defensive football, but the foundations to this, the way we keep clean sheets, the way we defend the back four alongside, with the two defensive midfielders in front of them, I think that's something that we can keep. But in terms of going forward and having possession, I think we can certainly improve on that.
Mani?
Sina, sorry.
Go ahead, Babak.
Can I just comment on
Yeah,
something?
of course. Feel free.
Sina, don't you agree that our style of football looks much better and functions much better when we play against teams that are arguably on paper stronger than us, teams that when they do attack, they have a certain thrust and cutting edge, not teams like UAE and Qatar, who, yes, they will dominate the ball, but they probably haven't reached a level where they can cut through a tactically disciplined team. And we saw UAE and Qatar during the Asian Cup. They could not really, I cannot remember many chances against us, but against teams like Chile, for example, or during the World Cup against Argentina, teams that could really cut us open, we were much more threatening on the counter-attack because we had the space to play in and we could actually break through much quicker and much more fluidly.
Yeah, I agree, but you also have to consider that we said Queiroz. What Queiroz did best was to get the best out of a generation maybe isn't as talented as the previous ones. But I think the generation that is coming through now is a lot more talented in terms of attacking football. So my point is we shouldn't just limit ourselves to a counter-attacking game. Of course, we under this philosophy we play a lot better against bigger teams. But that doesn't mean we have to play that style of football against the teams around us as well. As you said, we kind of struggled against UAE and Qatar, but that was because we were almost too defensive. So I'd like to see that change, especially in the World Cup qualifiers where we will play against a lot of teams in and around us.
Mani?
Well, I have to say, if Otto Rehagel or someone like him tactically is the next Iran coach, I might send back my Iranian passport because it would be depressing beyond words. I mean, let's not forget, Carlos Queiroz was defensive with Ronaldo in his team, so I'm not sure that necessarily his brand of football is the blueprint for the future of the national team. And the thing with the national team is that you have flexibility. It's not like a club where you play once a week or even twice a week. You can come in and you can change the style without it being too much of a wrench. So I wouldn't put out the advert saying wanted defensive coach. I think you get the coach who suits all the criteria, or as many of the criteria as possible, and then whatever their philosophy is, we stick to that. I mean, nobody after Iran failed to qualify for the 2010 World Cup said what we need is someone who's defensive. So I don't think that we necessarily need to continue in this vein. I mean, as I said earlier, there's a difference between being defensive and having a solid defence. Every single successful team in the history of football has had a solid defence, but not every single team in the history of football has been defensive.
Thank you. So would you guys think that whoever the next coach is going to be, do you think the players will be disciplined, and will they play tactical football under the new manager? Sina?
I think you're going into too much detail, on tactical football. I mean, at the end of it, as fans, what we want to see is our team winning, but at the same time, we want to win it, with a good performance in terms of really not just winning 1-0, but really showing that we're more powerful than the other team, especially against the Asian teams. So yeah, I think of course tactical discipline is always needed. In every team, tactical discipline is needed. The ability to get the players to stick with a certain tactic throughout the game. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that tactic has to be a defensive football where we give the opposition 30 or 40% possession on a game-to-game basis. At the same time, I'm not really criticising Queiroz because I still think what he did was great considering what he had. But I think in the future, especially in the next 3 or 4 years, that kind of style had to change. And I think we all agreed that if he was staying on, he had to give more youngsters a chance, and he had to be more, ambitious in terms of the way, in terms of his tactics.
Mani?
Well, if the players aren't tactically disciplined, then it's a fault that lies with them, not the next coach, because they should be professional enough to not sulk if they feel like sulking, and get on with it.
Babak?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's too early to say how we're going to play. As Sina said, it depends on the coach, it depends on his philosophy. But I stick to what I said earlier, that I hope we try to build upon this rather than try to make a 180-degree turn or change and let us fall on our faces and get knocked out of the qualification campaign way too early.
Thank you.
Do you think a gradual change, not necessarily, as you said, 180-degree, but a gradual change within the next 4 years or even 8 years, not even 8, but 4 years, we would need to be a bit more, adventurous in the way we play?
I think that against teams in and around us, teams that we've historically struggled against in the last 20 years, even the likes of UAE, Qatar, etc., I think that, yes, we could be a little bit more adventurous. But again, it's about the players that you have. Until recently, Ashkan Dejaga was probably our only pacey player, and he's not even a pacey player. So now that we have Jahon Bakhsh coming through, we have Sardar Azmoun coming through, a couple of youngsters that can rejuvenate the attack, yes, we probably will. And I who is to say that Carlos Queiroz wouldn't have done? Look at the way we played against Chile. Ball possession was more or less roughly, we were, I think, about 45% by the end of the game. So we were much more adventurous, but we were still playing a solid defensive game and on the counter-attack, but we had much more cutting edge. So I think given time and given proper preparation, let's not forget he was probably in charge of the national side, which had the least amount of preparation compared to his predecessors. Getting games against European teams or international teams like Sweden and Chile will only benefit us the same way they have benefited South Korea and Japan for the last 15 years, because when they have a FIFA date, they end up playing against top teams so that when they come up against them in major tournaments, they are not overwhelmed, even though the results suggest otherwise throughout their history. But they become acquainted to this, they become familiar, and their players don't end up taking selfies with Zlatan at the end of the game like he's the second coming. So that's the kind of environment we want to create by making it normal for us to play teams like Chile or Sweden during international dates.
I totally agree with that, but I mean, I don't think that's down to the coach, is it? I mean, that's another issue.
No, it's about the federation, yeah. But I mean, it ties in. Let's not forget, Carlos Queiroz did not receive much support. I know for a fact that he was booking tickets for flights at a point a year or 18 months ago for one of their games. So that's not something the national.
He asked to do that.
Because he had no faith. Because he had no faith in the people that were doing it. It's not that he wants to do some. It's not that he wants to spend his time doing things like that. It's because he has no faith when he leaves it in the other people's hands. We have to admit that.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, how can he not have faith in someone booking tickets? I don't remember any stories about Iran not turning up somewhere because nobody booked the flights. I think he took it upon himself very, very early on to fly here and there and check out hotels and goodness only knows what else. But I mean, that's another issue. It kind of goes beyond what we're talking about. Whoever the next guy is, I personally won't miss it if we don't have games where we have less possession than teams like Qatar and Bahrain and UAE. And just for the record, the Chile game was 69-31 in favour of Chile. You know, Iran don't dominate possession, and at some point there'll be a run of games, if they can continue like this, where they will go behind, the other team will score the first goal, and then you know, the question I always wondered, which I suppose will never be answered now, is what would have happened then? Would Iran have been able to change the system? But who knows? So firstly, for me, the next coach, I would like to be someone who's competent and someone who's a bit more adventurous and can develop the discipline that Carlos Queiroz brought in.
Hopefully that will be Khiyabani. So, guys, I just want to conclude this, and we've heard the big news that obviously Javad Nekounam is retiring after, I believe, 34 years, and he broke the record for the caps, 151 caps, and scored 39 goals. So, Babak, coming with you, can you just give us a brief summary of his career and what you saw of him as a captain? And we know how much Queiroz is a big fan of Nekounam as a captain, and he's definitely a big fan of Pezhman Pars, so they're buddies. So, what do you think?
I think that Nekounam's career internationally needs to be praised for sure, but there was a period of probably 5-6 years somewhere in the middle towards the end of his career where you didn't see him influencing the games as much as you would think someone of his ability could. He would slow down the tempo way too much, especially before the Carlos Queiroz reign when Iran tried to play a more adventurous attacking game. A lot of the time in the middle of the pitch it would get slowed down. He's very lax on the ball. Reminds me of a player we had at Blackburn at the time, Keith Andrews, where he would hold and dally on the ball for far too long and let opponents close him down very quickly. So I think that Carlos Queiroz's style of football benefited Javad Nekounam and allowed him to dictate the tempo far more than he would have earlier in his career when... let's say a couple of years earlier, he was 34, 35, and in the last couple of years, I could pick on one hand how many good games he had for us. But during the Asian Cup, he showed that he's still important with his experience and his wit. And over the last couple of games, he impressed me a little bit. Against Chile, he was decent. Against Iraq, I thought he was okay. So he will be missed. He is our international record appearance maker. It takes away a record from Ali Dai, which would make a lot of people happy as well. But I think he is replaceable.
Mani?
I think he's... Well, I don't know. I'm not sure who's better of him and Karim Barbary, to be honest. But I think one of those two... Well, both of those two are the two best midfielders who've ever played in Western Asia, in my opinion. And he was a talisman. He was one of those players who went beyond the pitch. You know, he had a presence everywhere, and he was a leader who most of the players looked up to. A real influence on the team in many ways, and it will be very difficult to find someone who's going to fill those shoes. It will happen, obviously, over time, but there isn't an obvious replacement for him in that sense. I think Teimur Young would be an excellent choice as the next captain, but Nekounam you see, what Nekonan did was he put anyone who wasn't Iranian who watched the national team play. The first name they always came up with as for praise was Nekonan because of his professionalism, because of his tactical nous. Even before Queiroz, I agree with Babak. There were games where he was, he's off the pace, but he's been a fulcrum in that team and the heartbeat of that team for a decade and a half. And I think you cannot praise him enough. What a magnificent player! And if we find someone who can fill those shoes, then I'll be very happy indeed.
Sina?
Well, for me, I think he is probably the most underrated player we've ever produced. I think he doesn't get the praise as he should. I think Middle East in general doesn't really produce these kind of players who are sometimes more appreciated in Spain or while he was at Osasuna than he was in Iran or in Asia. So I think he's one of he's been there for 15 years. He's seen it all. Whether it was that defeat to Bahrain, the for me the most painful defeat as a fan, the 3-1 loss, to the game against Argentina. So he's been a long time. Iranian captaincy is certainly one of those titles that brings a lot of controversy with it. No matter who the player is, but I think for me he handled it really well. He's a true role model for everyone. For the kids growing up, for the next generation. His attitude, his mentality, the way he plays, the way he looks at the game, I think is a lot different to the players we usually produce. And I hope we do produce players like him in the long term, because they're always needed. But for me, as I said, he's the most underrated player we've ever had.
Thank you. My last question for this podcast will be, now that we think that Nekonan's retiring, who would you guys think will be the next captain? Babak?
I think it all depends on which players decide to continue playing with the national team. I think right now there's a bit of a limbo, considering I think a few players will wait to see what happens next before deciding their international future. I can see Andronic Teimourian, Jalal Hosseini, Masoud Shojai. These are three players who I feel we don't know if they're going to continue with the national team or not, and it'll depend on who comes in next. But for me, I would probably say in the interim period, Andronic Teimourian. He's been our best player in two back-to-back World Cup qualifications in 2006 and 2014 for me. When I saw him in the run-up to the World Cup, I thought he's unfit, and he looks like he's gained some weight as well. And even after that, going to the Asian Cup, but he still performed brilliantly. And even now, he still has an engine that no other Iranian player has in the center of the midfield. So I would think it would be a nice way for him to cap his international career. One of the most underrated players we've produced, and arguably one of the best defensive midfielders in Asian football history.
Mani?
Teimourian.
Sina?
Well, right now, he's the captain of the national team, because he was vice captain when Nekonan was there, so automatically he gets promoted. But I think in the long term, one of the players that should be looked at and will be looked at is Ehsan Safi.
Yeah.
He's only 25. He had around 70-odd caps. He's captained Iran before, so I think he'll definitely be there in the long term. But as the guys said, certainly for the next couple of years, Andronic for me.
Thank you guys for this lovely discussion. And Babak, what's your Twitter handle for the viewers?
Yeah, it's Babak Golriz, so BABAK GOLRIZ.
Mani?
It's Mani, MANI 2911, and a prize of untold riches to whoever guesses what the 2911 refers to. And it's not my pin.
Sina?
You can find me on Twitter at SINAA_SA.
Thank you. And then towards this pod, there's gonna be the press conference that Pezhman Pars had with Carlos Queiroz. There's some great insights that Queiroz told them that if anybody wants to tune to him, they could do that. But thank you guys for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pasha.
Cheers, guys.
Visited Sweden and Stockholm. I had the privilege to be in one of their trainings. It was a so-called closed training, but since the training was in a stadium where basically you could stand just beside the stadium and see the training, there were a couple of hundred fans watching them play. And the thing is that they were playing on a artificial grass arena, which itself is kind of strange because the game was supposed to be held on a natural grass, and also none of these players are used to playing artificial grass. So the training was more light, easy training, and they didn't do much. But about the Sweden and Iran game, well, we all saw that the speed, the knowledge, the international experience from the Swedish players were above the Iranians, and that was the main reason that Iran lost. Iran had problems in the defense, and my standpoint is this with the Iran national team. If we're able to don't let any goals in the first 30 minutes or even in the first half, then it can be in our favor, because we have a strong defense. But if we let an early goal in, then we have to change our game plan, our game tactics, and try to become an offensive team with and holding the ball. Now that didn't happen. Sweden was leading 2-0 in just a couple of, I think the first goal came in 10 minutes, in the 10th minute, and the second goal came shortly thereafter. Fortunately, Iran managed to get a penalty by Vahid Amiri, who was doing great, by the way, in that game. And the second half usually turned out to be how second halves in training games are, friendly games. There are too many substitutions, and the game didn't really have anything to offer. But it was a great first half. I'm sure all the guys have been talking a lot about it. But speaking about Carlos Queiroz, in the press conference after the game, I also had the privilege to be there and listen to what he had to say. And I have to say, amongst all the things that happened the last week, where I've been following the national team and the media and everything, and even the game, I must say that the press conference was the most, how can I say it, entertaining one, or the one which I will remember most of all. And that's only because of Queiroz. Queiroz, during the press conference, really spoke his heart out. Every question he got, he answered very thoroughly and gave details about everything. And my question to him was that whose decision is it that you're going to quit, and what has happened? And he gave us journalists there a very long answer. First of all, he was kind of, you could see in his body, in his the way he spoke, that he was sad and feeling kind of down. But basically, he said this. He said, "This is not what I wanted. This was not my intention, or this is not something that I desire. This decision has been made by somebody else." And this somebody else, Queiroz said, was a gentleman called Dr. Asadi. Now, who is Dr. Asadi? He is the new vice president of the Iranian national team, with Kafashian still being the president. He's been there now for 5-6 weeks only, but already have made clear stance on what he thinks about Queiroz. And this is from Queiroz himself, that said, Dr. Asadi said that we, the Iranian national team, and me as a manager, haven't gotten any results. We haven't introduced any new players. We haven't done anything special with the national team at all. He said that he's not satisfied with what I have done with the national team. And what he said, and this is kind of shocking. He said, Mr. Queiroz, you're not even at the minimum of what I see a national team coach should be. So as we say in Persian, not even hadd aqal, the minimum standards, the minimum required for what he sees in a coach, he can't see that in Queiroz. And Queiroz, whether we like it or not, he has some great experience. He had been first and most for us been working with FIFA as a technical advisor since 1989, been all around the world working with different federations. He's been head coach for Real Madrid, for South Africa, for UAE, if I'm not mistaken, for the Portugal national team. He's been assistant with Alex Ferguson, and you know all of that. So that's simply not true. The minimum standards. None of the Iranian coaches in Iran or outside Iran will ever have such CV as Queiroz has had. So he was really sad about Queiroz not getting any results, as he said. Or not sad, more disappointed and more angry. Or as he said, that Dr. Assadi said, well, you can maybe entertain people and bring a few laughs, but that's basically it. That's all you can give to the Iranian people. And he also said that Dr. Assadi himself said, in front of Kafashian, so this is a vice president that clearly can stand above Kafashian. So Kafashian said, well, after this, with everything you have heard, I don't think there's a room for you anymore. There's no place for you here. I think things are going to get even worse. I doubt it if we even will qualify to the World Cup 2018. And besides all this, Dr. Assadi, I don't know if he's a real doctor or not. Everybody here in Iran is either a doctor or an engineer as soon as they get a position. So I don't know if he's a doctor. But this Mr. Assadi have basically made the federation into two federations. And this is what Carlos Queiroz said. He said, in Iran now, we don't have one federation. We have two different federations in the same place. He said, I don't mind having different opinions. 2 opinions, 4 opinions. It's all good. I don't mind that. But you can't have 2 different agendas. You can't be working at, striving at 2 different goals at the same time. Somebody pushing that way and the other way pushing that other way. And he was also really disappointed that the Football Federation in Iran didn't take the first team, the national team, as its first priority. And he was referring to Azmoun and Jahanbakhsh being a part of the Iranian national team, the under-23 team, who played the qualifiers against such teams like Nepal, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and I think it was Nepal, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia. Really weak teams, and also Palestine, if I'm not mistaken. So the question is, did we need our 2 young players for that kind of game or not? If you ask Queiroz, he says no. He needed them for preparation for the World Cup 2018, which is in his mind. He says the preparations starts already June 2015. Not 2016, as some in the federation wanted to say. And that's why he wanted them in these 2 games against good opponents. So, he said, this is, and I repeat myself, this is not a decision that I made, but I don't understand. If Assadi don't want me, why don't he just fire me? And probably this is just mind games. He wants maybe Queiroz to quit himself so they don't have to pay him a heavy salary because he had a contract to 2018. So at this moment, Queiroz still has a contract, but the question is, what will happen now? And he also said, you can't play mind tricks with coaches. I mean, a part of being coach is to actually, being a master of mind games. He said, we have been mastering mind games since we were in kindergarten, so that doesn't work on me. He also said, Mr. Asadi and whoever he represents, which in my mind or everybody else's mind means that he actually is there for maybe doing somebody else's dirty work. Now, if it's the sports ministry or somebody else, I leave that up to you guys to decide. So a really sad Queiroz was speaking about 30 minutes in the press conference, which in itself it's kind of unique, because press conferences are usually you answer, you get to ask 2 or 3 questions about the game maybe, but this Queiroz, he really wanted this information to come out, and he was speaking directly from his heart, and he was really praising the Iranian national team and the players, and he said he had all the love for the fans and everything. And he said, I've been around the world, I've been coaching so long, and I have never felt the love that I felt from Iran anywhere else. True or not, it's still great to hear that we actually do have fans and players that support a coach. And he's come back to Iran as a hero, but his employers don't see it that way. Now, what this will come down to, nobody knows. What we do know is that Queiroz won't be an Iranian national coach as long as Asadi is in the federation. Now, another scenario is that Asadi all of a sudden changes his mind and maybe lets Queiroz stay. But from what I've heard about Mr. Asadi so far, his first priority is to get rid of Queiroz. As he said, you're not even at the minimum standards of what I see in a coach. And this comes from a guy who's not involved in football generally. Unfortunately, this is a symptom for the Iranian football in general. This is something we're used to, but we will never accept. You can never accept mismanagement, although you can get used to it. What this will come down to, nobody knows. Iran have a couple of months now without any friendlies or anything else, and that should be enough time for them to get a new coach, or at least solve these issues. We don't know what will happen. Well, but we all can agree that what Queiroz have done in the last 4 years is amazing, given the facts, the poor quality of the players he had so far. He more or less had to keep a kind of old squad now, until now, because there haven't been enough youth growth. Now that's coming shortly. We have players like Azmoun and Jahan Bakhsh. We have Amiri that done good work. We have Pur Ali Ganji in the defense that can hopefully get some good experience in China. We have a couple of other young players in the national team who's now, I wouldn't say young, but at least young enough to be in the World Cup 2018, maybe even longer. Such players as Alireza Haqiqi, the goalkeeper, Ehsan Haj Safi, our left winger. And we have a lot of players that need to go. And with all due respect, I mean that's they will be old enough and probably not good enough for the World Cup 2018. Such players as Bekzadeh, Sadeghi. We have players. I think even Ashkan Bejarev. I'm sure he will stay until 2018, but and maybe he will be at his prime. But that will be his last moment in the big scene. Haydari, Shojai, we have some players there that need to give room to other young players, and that would be probably Carlos Queiroz' next step during this World Cup qualifiers that's coming ahead. But we don't know what will happen now. We only can hope and wish and dream for a better national team, a better organized team, and hopefully with a good coach that can make that can work as he's supposed to do and not have a beef with the federation all the time. Okay, guys, that was all from me. Sorry for the long input here. I'm sure Pasha can edit it and make it shorter and more correct. Hope you guys have a nice time.